welcome to Political Brew. I'm Phil Hirschkorn. Our topics this week, the Maine governor's race, and can unconventional candidates with no elective experience break through? The U.S. Senate race, and why Susan Collins has 4 million reasons to be happy. Janet Mills versus Donald Trump, and what's on the agenda when the state legislature reconvenes in January. My guests this week are Joe Bruno, a former Maine House Republican leader at Augusta and longtime selectman and school board member in Raymond, and Genius Black, an author and the host of Maine's Black Future podcast, which is published by the Maine Monitor. Welcome, guys. There are a lot of announced candidates in Maine for the governor's race and quite a range of life experience. We expect competitive Republican and Democratic primaries and independents seeking the job, but they don't have to compete in the primaries, those independents, next June. The best known of them is State Senator Rick Bennett. Bennett was a Republican, a former state Republican Party chairman and state Senate president, but he has defected. This week he talked about why at a Cumberland Club gathering with former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, also a lifelong Republican until recent years. She's now a co-founder of a new party called Forward, preaching the gospel of less partisanship, less conflict, more resolution. The Forward Party's first endorsement is Bennett, and both of them no longer feel like they belong in the party so dominated by Donald Trump and Trumpism. I also asked Bennett if he's running as an independent to avoid that Republican primary.
No, I would not want to serve as governor in any party. I want to serve as an independent. I'm running as an independent because I want to govern as an independent. It means a completely different approach, one that's more inclusive, more collaboration, more consensus building, more compromise.
I don't think there is a Republican Party. I think there's a cult of Donald Trump. That's what I see nationally anyway.
So some of our viewers may remember, by the way, Christy Whitman was the first female governor of New Jersey. The state since elected another one. But Joe, let me start with you. Maine hasn't had an independent governor in 32 years since Angus King first won the job in the 90s, around the same time Whitman was governor.
Yep.
Right. So can Bennett break the mold?
I don't think so. I think Rick stepped out of the Republican Party. He didn't feel part of the party. I always think you stay in a party to change it. If you don't like what the party's doing, you stay in and you make changes. You are the driver of those changes. He had every opportunity to do that. As a former state chair of the party, like I was, we know how to work the Republican Party. But to step away and I think when you look at some of his votes in the legislature over the last 2 terms, Republicans would question some of those votes.
Like which ones?
He has a lot of environmental votes that are probably different than most Republicans would vote. So I think that kind of puts him in this corner in the Republican Party where people are going to look at him and go, he's not part of what I want as a Republican governor.
What about you, Genius? I mean, for an independent to win statewide here, obviously you'll have to pull in some Democrats, you would think, because our electorate's a third, and a third.
Yeah,
where's the appeal?
I don't hear Bennett saying that what he wants to do is remake or completely change the Republican Party, though I understand what you're saying. I think what he's saying is by stepping outside of the party, he wants to draw people away from MAGA. That's different than conservative thinking. For instance, I'm from Texas. I grew up around lots of conservatives and Christians. They don't fit into MAGA, many of the people that I grew up around, because it's a very different set of values. So, what I see him doing is clearly separating himself, I believe it's on purpose, from the Republicans, but still, like in a place like Maine, being able to say, I still represent some conservative values. Again, I'm from Texas. I'm not afraid of conservative values. I just vote against MAGA very often.
I mean, Northeast Republicans are a lot different than your middle of the country Republicans. We tend to be more liberal. We tend to be more moderate. And he's afraid of what's going on in the Republican Party. There are 2 factions, obviously. The MAGA Republicans, and still you have a strong moderate Republican base in Maine.
Let's remind our viewers, if Bennett had stayed in the Republican Party, his competition for the governorship would include at least 3 businessmen. I'm thinking of presidential cousin Jonathan Bush, Ben Midgley, Owen McCarthy, as well as State Senator James Libby, and then there's former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Bobby Charles. None of them are really as well known as Bennett is because he's been such a prominent state senator for a number of years.
Right, and everybody's having a hard time getting traction in this Republican primary right now. You have some who are aligning themselves with Donald Trump and say, I am your Donald Trump guy in Maine. Mm-hmm. And then you have others who are saying, no, I'm a business guy. I think we could change the state and make it more prosperous. So there are different slants coming into this. But, you know, Charles, Jones, Wessels, they're all vying for that Trump endorsement.
And what about on the Democratic side? We have candidates like Nirav Shah and Angus King III who've never held elective office before.
Yes.
Is that a liability given that the other candidates we've talked about do have so much elective experience?
It is a potential liability. Yes, I don't know that it is necessarily a liability because I think a fresh face and fresh ideas that are outside of MAGA and things like that, or outside of the type of politics that are going on right now, I think that can potentially be a big benefit, right? So, for instance, Nirav Shah, he has name recognition. I remember doing COVID, feeling really overwhelmed, and I'll just say freaked out, really scared. I mean, seriously, I'm doing research, I'm watching this, I'm thinking about my kids, and some of the things that I literally saw Nirav Shah say gave me comfort. I recall that, never mind what other people recall, right? So for me, I know that, you know, Shah not having been elected and not, you know, been someone who was pushing around high level of politics based off of budgets and things in the state of Maine is a little different. But I hope that people are able to stay open-minded and maybe understand, like a Donald Trump who came in with a difference. Sometimes a difference can really shake things up. It's not always bad.
It's interesting because at his first town hall this week, which News Center Maine covered and I attended, he made kind of the argument you're making, which is I have crisis experience and I have management experience. And when I was number 2 at the US CDC, that's more employees and a bigger budget than the state of Maine government. You think that might gain traction, that argument?
I think that people should, it might gain traction. I appreciate that. But I will think, what I'm saying is that I think people, the way we have to start approaching the election seasons is with more of an open mind instead of trying to immediately shut down our minds. And so people need to consider what that might look like instead of instantly deciding if it will work or not.
Okay, when we come back after this break, a closer look at the U.S. Senate race. This week, a new political action committee was launched, a PAC, really a super PAC, meaning it can accept unlimited donations as a certain type of organization under the tax code, a 501c4 nonprofit, if you've ever heard of that. It's called the Lead Maine Committee, and it will be run by Republican State Representative Laurel Libby. The goal is to help conservative Republicans win state and federal office. Libby told me it will have at least a $4 million budget next year, and its top priority is helping Susan Collins win another term.
She is serving as the last Republican senator in all of New England. So we look forward to supporting her with the Lead Maine Committee and ensuring that Senator Collins does hold her seat, that we have a Republican in the Senate from Maine.
So, Joe, this, of course, means Laurel Libby herself will not run for that second open seat, second CD, vacated by Jared Golden, which we've discussed before. Right. What do you make of this development? Will it help Susan Collins? Can't hurt, right?
It can't hurt. But, I mean, the fact is $4 million is a drop in the bucket and what you're going to see in that U.S. Senate race. If Janet Mills wins her primary, that race will be a $600 million race. You know, that's how much money is going to...
600?
600
I think the
million.
last one was 100, maybe 200 with
no,
Gideon versus Collins.
No, that was over 200 million.
Yeah, 200 million, Gideon versus Collins. You say 600.
I think 600 million on this race.
Triple that up.
Because they think Janet Mills will really have a chance of beating Susan Collins. If Plattner is a candidate, it's still a $400 or $500 million race.
That's too much money in our politics, right? Isn't that a Democratic talking point and Citizens United? We can't have this kind of outside spending?
I mean, yes. But we do. It is our reality. The amount of money spent by these folks, both when they come in with, I got $5 million, I have this, it makes a difference. It hits our minds and our spirits, and we think that it equals winning now, even if it doesn't really. So whether or not these things should affect us in these ways, they do. So I mean, you know, that's why I'm listening to what you're saying, because that really does matter.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what you can do with that kind of money to help people in Maine. And, you know, we're talking about electing someone to a position, but that shows how important this position of Maine senator is in this coming race.
Could help determine the U.S. Senate majority one way or the other.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's attached to things outside of the state of Maine, although we're here thinking about these things. And that bubble up power and priority, I think, is also something people need to be considering. We're here in Maine, but we have the ability, because this is how Maine is, and we lead in some ways, to flip things potentially and change the flow of some things in the United States. And I just want people to keep local news in mind, keep tracking the national news as well.
It's probably worth noting that the biggest donor to this PAC, or the PAC, so the lead Maine committee is affiliated with the Sentinel Fund, which is another big organization.
Super PAC. Yeah.
Super PAC, and the biggest donors, billionaire Timothy Mellon. He gave $200 million in 2024 to back Trump and other Republicans. So this clearly is outside money, national interest.
Yeah, and you know, and good for Laurel Libby to get that position. I mean, it's good for her, you know. But as far as the Susan Collins race, I would hope she uses most of her money to elect local people, local representatives, local state senators, because I think that's going to be more important for the state of Maine than a U.S. senator. You know, I think Susan Collins wins no matter who the candidate is. I think she's done that well of a job.
I can't say that I fully agree with that. However, I have a lot of respect for Susan Collins and even how she makes decisions. So seeing Laurel Libby, she's intelligent, she's powerful, she knows how to raise money. I think that what they're doing will be formidable. I can say that. I can say that.
So let's take a couple minutes to talk about Graham Plattner, the insurgent Democratic Senate candidate, completed what I've been calling his fall tour of town halls. The 33rd and last one was in Biddeford. It drew more than 600 people. He delivered his usual remarks about economic inequality and affordability, wanting to do more about housing and health care, Medicare for all, what he'll fight for in Washington, and this new criticism of Senator Collins.
I will fight to claw war powers back from the executive branch, something which Susan Collins just showed recently she has no interest in when she voted against Senator Kane's bill to make sure that any military action against Venezuela required Senate approval.
Do you like his progressive message?
You know, I've been keeping track of Susan Collins for a while, and I know she supports the military, so that's not, I think, in question. But he does make a good point about how she's making decisions. Right now, we have folks in the military who are reaching out to non-military counsel because they are afraid of following potentially illegal orders. That says a lot. People with a lot of integrity are inside of our United States military, in my opinion. And so when I see how these things are breaking down, hold on. Sorry, I'm losing my point. I'm sorry. Well, can you repeat the question again?
Well,
sorry about that.
You're enjoying Plattner, but you're not not sure how that's going to connect if he's the nominee. I mean, it's complicated. There's a lot of issues, especially on national security.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, in terms of him talking about the military and maybe her not making the best decisions at the moment, it doesn't completely
change. He has credibility
change.
in that regard
as
a veteran.
He does. It looks real.
Well, I mean, you know, and you know, you saw that ad with the 6 senators saying, you know, they'll follow orders. I mean. You know, and then people say, oh, Trump said we're going to shoot him. Yeah, I mean, that's not what happened. But it was kind of interesting that you're seeing these senators say this stuff, don't follow the chain of command. I mean, honestly, I didn't serve in the military. I was number 5 in the draft, and it got called off. Thank you, Richard Nixon. But I mean, I would have served, but I would have followed my orders just the way you're supposed to when you swear to the Constitution that you're going to obey orders. Now, Plattner, I watched her interview with him. I couldn't make sense of it, all right? I couldn't figure out what he was trying to say about anything, you know?
He talked about gun control,
right,
transgender rights,
right,
his family.
The only part I understood was the transgender rights, where he stood on that issue. But
which is against the proposed referendum next year to ban transgender girls from high school.
Right, but as far as the gun control stuff, I don't know what he said. You know, he talked about his military experience
against
and how he knows guns.
Ban.
You know, that he knows guns, but it was confusing. Okay. What he's very good at is promising free things to everybody. And I think that's what's making him popular right now, is we're going to give you everything you want, you know, because we're going to take it from the billionaires and the millionaires and tax the hell out of them, and you will get everything for free.
So if you're interested in more of that interview that Joe mentioned, thank you very much. It's posted in full on our app, streaming, News Center, Maine.plus. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Janet Mills versus Donald Trump. Governor Janet Mills this week sounded the alarm on a change by the Trump administration to federal funding for supportive housing for the homeless, cutting funds provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, for vouchers that subsidize 70% of the rent. Mills says this change will jeopardize housing for 1,200 people in Maine who live in all 16 counties, 106 communities, the most affected in Bangor.
So they're shifting federal funding away from stable housing to short-term shelters and time-limited transitional housing, which just leaves people behind instead, kind of dumps them on the street. This new directive from the Trump administration is callous, it is cruel, and it is unnecessary.
So, genius, is Trump kicking people onto the street while, as Mills says, he builds a gilded ballroom at the White House?
Well, because this thing hasn't happened yet, no, he's not doing it yet. However, he might very well be about to. One of the things that she said, and I don't know if I won't say it's an exact quote, but she said that Trump has never been worried about where to lay his head at night. That struck me outside of everything else she said, because I know the actual emotionality of not only worrying about laying my head down at night, but my kids' heads, and if it's cold outside. And so we can come up with a lot of rules and rigidities, and then things get going, and those rigidities end up with people sleeping in their car overnight in the cold. So I can appreciate, hey, we want to be efficient. Hey, if the long-term thing doesn't work, then we need something short-term. I don't think we've proven that the long-term housing doesn't work. Everyone can't just get some treatment and now they're okay.
Joe, there's almost a philosophical debate here between the housing first model, which advocates for the homeless believe in, and then the Trump administration seems to be pivoting toward more of a treatment first model.
Exactly.
How do you see what's going on?
I mean, the cut is about, okay, now that we have these people in shelter, now we need to get them treatment for their addictions, because a lot of them are addicted, or we need to put them through job training so that they could go out and get a job, and that we don't have to subsidize their housing for the rest of their lives. And then, you talk about Maine, and they have this continuum of care model. Well, what have they done with it? Yes, we have put people in housing, but what do we do afterwards? We don't do anything. So when you look at the Mills administration and what they've done with after you house people, have they trained them to go find a job? Have they gotten them off their addiction? And the answer to a lot of that is no. They just feel like, well, if we got them housing, we're good to go right now. But the taxpayers are picking up that bill. So it's time that I think Trump is trying to say, let's get these people back on their feet. That's what's important. And there's a lot of people who think that's the right model. We got them housing, let's get them off addictive drugs, and let's get them job trained so they can go out, earn a living, and the taxpayer does not have to subsidize them.
And homelessness is a growing problem in Maine, across the country. A lot of it's tied to the affordability crisis, the price of housing most of all. I mean, it's not really a choice, but there's compassion, there's tough love. There's a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on. And I'll say this, maybe because I'm a Texas guy, I'm a dad, I played sports, I believe in tough love. But I do also believe in compassion and removing cruelty. And so when I look at these situations, it's a presumption that the majority of people who are in long-term housing have addiction problems that are active, or that they haven't been looking for jobs, or they just need more training over a couple months. That's a huge leap. When I know some of these people, I've had conversations with people, when you look at their actual circumstances, it does not fit into those buckets. I don't hear the other side talking about that. They keep repeating the same things that don't fit everybody. It's cruelty.
In other words, there's economic reasons for homelessness. It's not that everyone's addicted or has
yes, but to give a quick example,
mental illness.
Say there's a person who has two mental illnesses, and they're on the autism spectrum, and they only have this much job skills because they've actually been incarcerated for 4 years out of the last 8. And now they need to gain these skills, and you're saying that after 2 or 3 months, if you don't have them, no housing for you. No. That is a person who needs more job training than 2 or 3 months, who needs continued support, because they're being on the autism spectrum, if it's affecting them in that negative way, doesn't just go away because they have a job. They might need continued support. And they still need a place that they can afford to live, which this has nothing to do with addressing the affordability of housing.
Joe?
I don't think anyone's saying we're going to just kick them out after 2 or 3 months. But we would like to see plans in place that say, okay, we're going to provide you housing. Now, get on your feet. this is what your plan's going to be. And over the next 6 months or a year, we're going to put you through job training. And if you are addicted, we're going to get you into counseling to get you off your drug addiction. That's what we're saying. We're not assuming everybody has that problem. There are people with mental illness who will never work in this country or this state. And we understand that. But we can get them treatment that they need so they can live a normal life.
Okay, all right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, what's on the agenda in Augusta in January? In about 6 weeks, the 132nd Maine State Legislature will reconvene for its second session at the State House in Augusta. The second-year session is usually shorter than the first, to April instead of June, the heavy lift of passing a biennial budget in the rearview mirror. And most of what will come up is unfinished business carried over from the previous session. A 10-member bipartisan legislative council is the gatekeeper. So what's on the agenda and what's already been rejected? I'm kind of intrigued by what we've already heard has been rejected, and we've talked about immigration earlier in the show, and one of the Democratic bills that was rejected would ban ICE officers, any law enforcement officers, but we know who they're thinking of, from wearing masks as they go about their business. Obviously, we've seen stepped up federal law enforcement in North Carolina and this week and all over the country at other cities. What's your view of that? It's been rejected. Is that a good idea, though?
Wait, so rejecting the bill?
So it's not going to get a
bans
hearing.
Right.
That's right.
I think that there should be hearings on banning the masks. I think that the masks should be banned. I'm not big on banning a whole lot of things, but I believe that as law enforcement, particularly federal level law enforcement folks, to come in and to do your job, you not only need to identify yourself, you need to be identifiable, and people need to know that you aren't there to harm them, not just because you're ICE, but because you're not impersonating an ICE official. So I think that in America and inside of democracy, yes, I'm going to use the term like equity, in a society where these are high priorities, law enforcement officials showing up, sometimes cameras on, sometimes off, and with their faces covered is monstrous.
A Republican bill, still staying in immigration, but pivoting to a Republican rejected bill, was the idea to not allow people on visas that have expired from foreign countries to drive in the state of Maine. A narrower path, but...
Brought up because we had 2 people killed by drivers who were here illegally, who outstayed their visa and were driving illegally. And so the Secretary of State, Jenna Bellows, somehow they got licenses in the state of Maine when she swears that nobody who is here illegally gets a license. Well, he had 2 instances, and we have 2 people dead because of it. That's what brought forward that bill.
So Republican Senate leader Trey Stewart proposed that, and another idea he hoped for, which I'm sure you would have supported, was to allocate some of the state's excess surplus. Maybe that's the rainy day fund.
It is a rainy day fund.
To property tax relief at the local level. Not going to happen. You must be disappointed.
Well, he had that bill in that passed 4 years ago. Everybody over 65 got their property taxes frozen. And then all of a sudden, Democrats said, no, that's too much money. We don't want to help seniors with their property taxes, so we're going to repeal that bill. So everybody not only got the initial increase in their property taxes, but they got a double whammy because they had to catch up on the ones that were frozen.
The House Speaker's office, Speaker Ryan Fecteau, Democrats still control both chambers, tells me that he's proposing an electricity cost fairness tax credit. As we head into winter, natural gas prices are higher. Everyone's worried about that cost. Perennial issue. What do you think?
Well, I'm worried about it too. But before we go to that issue, can I go back quickly to the issue with licenses and immigrants? And again, I respect where you're coming from, Joe, and I hear these different sides of the kind of arguments. But I will say, I think it's important to understand that an illegal immigrant having a license when they shouldn't in Maine, and then harming or killing someone, because of alcohol or whatever it may be, I don't think we should then go, so the reason it happens is because they're an illegal immigrant and shouldn't be driving here. No, there are Americans who are here legally and have a license who accidentally kill people every month. I'm just being real. This is unfortunately a thing. We don't say that it's because they're illegal or not illegal or whatever. So I just think we have to be careful. We can look at these things, but it's very easy to judge, oh, well, it was done by an illegal immigrant, so that makes it worse. Well, Not necessarily, but that's a certain stance that certain people in America love to take.
Yeah, but if they did not have that license, they shouldn't have been driving. They were not here legally to get a license to drive in this country.
Yes, but people drive every day when they don't have a license.
Well,
then they get in trouble legally, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't be here.
So are you saying it's okay to do that, to drive without a license?
I obviously didn't say that.
No, you did. You just did. You said people do it every day.
That doesn't mean it's okay. I'm reflecting a reality.
Another thing that might be on the Democratic agenda is a housing bond. I understand there's several versions of that. No one knows exactly how much money, but again, we're talking about the need to build more affordable housing in this state.
Well, here we go again. But luckily, it takes a 2/3 vote to pass a housing bond. If any Republican votes for a housing bond right now, when the state is broke, what we haven't talked about is the supplemental budget that you're going to see presented sometime in January. And how big is that going to be? That's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars, because we have a hole in this budget because the biennial budget they passed was not balanced.
$11 billion? I thought
$11.5 billion.
I thought we had a balanced budget
That
constitutional amendment, Joe.
No, we do have that, but they have ways of getting around it. So, you know, they did not fully fund all the Medicaid shortfalls that they're going to have in 26 and 27.
Very quickly, we're running out of time. Either of you have a wish list? I give you the gavel. You're the legislator. What would you like to see on the agenda that we haven't talked about?
A reduction in income taxes. We are one of the highest tax states in New England, yet we have some of the lowest income in New England, per capita income. Why is that? Why can't we be like the rest of New England? Why can't we be like New Hampshire? No property tax, no sales tax, and the highest income in all of New England.
Genius, on your wish list?
Ooh, right on. I want to see both protection of the arts and protection of history, which are being heavily attacked all across America as well as in Maine. And part of that is expanding programs and including young Mainers, feeding the innovation economy. One of the things I was writing out was thinking about media production, audio engineering, the digital content creation, gaming, UI design, anything that feeds directly into the innovation economy, creating a stronger future for Mainers. But I think at a policy level, these things need to be supported. Maine leads in many ways, but the world can often see us as behind, and I think we can change that in some ways in the new session.
Well, there you have it. If you like Genius and Joe's ideas, call your legislator and try to get it on the agenda in January. That's all for Political Brew this week. Thank my guests, Joe Bruno and Genius Black, and thank you for watching.